Andrew Bridgen.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I commend the Honourable Member for Stafford for getting permission for this debate today. And I look at the motion before the House that this House calls on the Government to provide compensation to people who have been affected by the construction of HS2. Well, I take a little exception at the construction, Mr Deputy Speaker. I think there's been a lot of cost, a lot of injury, but especially to the taxpayer, but certainly in my constituency, which has been affected for 22 miles with blight for over a decade, there's plenty of injury and need for compensation, but there were actually never any construction. HS2, as the House knows, the high-speed rail system, the second project, was initiated by the then Labour government prior to the 2010 election. I think it was Lord Adonis's little pet project. I think he formulated it on the back of a fag package, a gimmick for the 2010 election manifesto for the Labour Party, and unfortunately George Osborne picked it up and ran with it. It is. I certainly would give way.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for giving way. Does he know that before Lord Adonis got his grubby hands on it, a design was made for HS2, designed by Arup Consulting? It would have connected with HS1. It would have gone into major transport hubs like Birmingham New Street and Manchester Piccadilly, which HS2 did not do. And it would have meant you could have gone from Manchester Piccadilly direct to France without any changes at all. And you know what? It would have been cheaper as well, because there'd have been no tunnelling through the Chilterns.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for his intervention. If we were going to have a debate about the many failings of HS2, I think we may need more than the time we've got allowed today. And that will be for another debate. And I'm no doubt that lessons have been learnt by the government. They always have. They've been very expensive lessons indeed for the taxpayer. So we know what HS2 is, the white elephant that got ever bigger on taxpayers' money. I think I had opposed the project before it even started. I voted against it on every opportunity and spoke against it for a decade. But the elephant got ever larger. When Phase 2B was finally dispatched, I think my constituency led a collective breath of relief. And the debate today is about HS2 compensation, and the phrase compensation is defined as an award, normally money paid in recognition of loss, suffering and injury. And although my constituency, we didn't have any construction of HS2, but we certainly had plenty of loss, injury and suffering. We had 10 years of blight. An area, two widths of football fields, the whole length of the constituency, 22 miles, sterilised. Countless houses were never built. At least one factory at the Lounge coal washing site had to be cancelled. That would have created 1,200 jobs. And we've had this blight for 10 years. My constituency is fortunate. We have the highest economic growth in the country. But that economic growth and prosperity would have been far better without the blight of all that land through the middle of the constituency for more than 10 years. I don't know what compensation is the Minister going to offer my constituents, some of whom went to their graves, and the biggest worry they had in their life was that HS2 was supposed to be going through their back garden. I reassured them that it was never going to happen. Despite all the bowl and bluster from the government, they was always going to run out of money. And in 2013, when the route was announced, I said, this is going to end up over £100 billion. It's in Hansard. And the House laughed. And they were right to laugh, because it wasn't £100 billion, was it? It was £160 billion at its peak. And the right honourable gentleman for Lichfield is quite right. You know, it's a project that was going to seamlessly move people around the country. But because they couldn't afford to ever get it into city centres because of the burgeoning cost of the project, it was a project that very quickly ended up being aiming to move people from nearly London to nearly Birmingham. And if it had proceeded on, it had gone to nearly Manchester. Well, I personally didn't know anybody that wanted to go from nearly London to nearly Birmingham, but the project had to continue. So it blighted my constituents. And I want to talk about one community in North West Leicestershire, the village of Measham, which was actually the most highly affected settlement on HS2. There was nowhere south of there on the planned route that was affected by the number of houses and the number of businesses that were going to be disrupted without mitigation, without any mitigation. So HS2 went in there, and we had, knowing it was one of the most deprived communities in my constituency, we had a regeneration plan, working with a fantastic company called Measham Land, where 450 desirable new houses were going to be built in the middle of the village on some wasteland, and that was going to fund bringing back the canal, a regeneration project, including 2 aqueducts, working with the Ashby Canal Trust to bring the canal back to Measham, have a cafe culture around a large basin where people would bring, at the end of the current development of the canal system, bring their longboats, and that was a key. Huge, huge investment in the village until HS2 was announced, and the route went straight through the middle of the Measham land site. And for 10 years, that regeneration of Measham has been delayed. And I'm not sure, so they've suffered, the people of Measham have suffered loss and injury, but I mean, where's the compensation? Okay, it's going to go ahead now, but it's 10 years delayed. That project would have been completed. So there's certainly huge aspects of that all the way along the route, and it won't be just in my constituency we've seen that. Who else has been injured? Well, I would maintain to the House, and I'll declare an interest, I'm probably the only member of Parliament who had to sell his house to HS2. A house which I bought in 2011. It was a substantial Georgian rectory without buildings, 14 acres of grounds with it, and I was forced by a judge to sell it under the extreme hardship scheme. And I sold it in 2015 to HS2. Now, being a member of Parliament, I thought, I can't deal with HS2 myself, so I'll employ some consultants to deal with it. So it's an arm's length transaction. And they charged me £25,000. Took 18 months. And I went through the system, and I saw the system. And I explained to the government afterwards how HS2 has swindled everybody along the line with their property prices. And I'll explain to the House how it's done. And it appears a transparently fair system. But I can assure the right honourable members, if you consider it and the psychology behind it, it most certainly is not. So anybody along the whole route is presented with the same options. HS2, it's to buy your property, or you have to sell your property for various reasons, whether it's land or a factory or a dwelling. You will be offered by HS2 a list of 10 valuers. The valuers will be main London estate agents who you will have no knowledge of. You may know the names. There's some of the very big estate agency companies were on that list of 10 valuers, but there would have been the London offices, which is very unlikely that anybody in the Midlands or the North would have ever had any contact with those. And you would be asked to choose one of those to value your property, and HS2 would choose another, which sounds pretty transparently fair. They would both come to your property or land or your factory, and they would come and do a valuation, and if they're within 10% of each other, HS2 said, then we just split the difference and we'll call that the valuation. Now, on paper, that sounds very fair, doesn't it? But think about the psychology of it. Those 10 valuers are the valuers for the whole route. They'll only ever work for an individual who chooses them at random, because no one has any, or she has any knowledge of whatsoever. It's a purely random choice. And at choosing that valuer, you've done all you can for them. They'll get paid their fee from HS2 for doing the valuation. But what they all on that list want to be is the valuer that gets chosen every time by HS2. And I put it to you, given the pressure and the burgeoning costs of the project, and the evidence given by whistleblowers who've left the land procurement side of HS2, which of the valuers do honourable and right honourable members think HS2 is going to choose on the next occasion? The valuer who puts in the highest price to buy my house and land from me, or the valuer who puts in the lowest price for my property or land, or any property and land. And that is the fact that the system used by HS2 was always going to drive down land and property prices paid for those affected by the route. And it's provable, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that that is exactly what it did. And there have been two notable whistleblowers who've left HS2, and I've spoken to both of them over the years. The director of HS2 was Doug Thornton. His mate was put in charge of planning and performance, and he was later put in charge of a £2.8 billion project to acquire all the land and properties that were needed along parts of the route. And he went back to HS2 and said, 2.8 billion is not enough. You can't make a budget and just say, well, we're just going to buy all that land and building for 2.8 billion. He said it was nearer 4.8 billion, but he was told that he had to buy them for that price. So what does that sound like? As if HS2 was ever paying a fair price for the properties it needed to acquire along the route. And also there was recently, and I've spoken to this gentleman as well, Andrew Bruce, who was in charge of buying land and properties for HS2 until 2016, and he had told his superiors that they had never paid the right amount of price, the fair market price, for any of that land and buildings that he'd bought while he's been there, and he was asked to shred a report that he'd done that went to that. So I know also these two whistleblowers, they've suffered loss and injury as well, because I'm told that they were unable to get another job in the industry after they whistleblew on the practices that they'd experienced in HS2. So I think they might need some compensation as well, because I think we should protect whistleblowers, because without things like that, we still have a continuation of the Horizon Post Office scandal. So I would maintain that individuals, communities have been damaged by HS2, and I'll be very interested to know what compensation the village of Measham is going to get, and what we're going to do for every householder and every landowner along that route that I can prove did not get the right price for it. Now, the Minister has promised me a meeting twice in the last 2 months, and I still haven't got the date for it. I really do hope he's going to come through for me. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I hope lessons will have been learned by HS2 and the government. And I think it's a week of scandals, whether it's the Horizon Post Office, the loan charge, or HS2. This government has not covered itself in glory.
Order.